Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our part two of our SCION quarterly webinar series that is focusing on our marketing and PR efforts for our wineries. We are really fortunate today to have Lou Hammond Group, along with VinePair CEO Adam Teeter, join us today to take a deep dive into what journalists are looking for in 2021. Last week, we started with Damian Wilson of SSU in the first part of our series, and that recording is on our SCION playlist on our YouTube channel. So please be sure to check that out if you missed it last week. Additionally, next week, we have a digital ad webinar series that will feature our friends at Sonoma Media Group, Amatero Media, as well as Hearst Publications. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carlin to kick us off from Lou Hammond Group. And then just so you know, please direct all questions when we get to the Q&A portion to the Q&A section so that we don't miss it through the chat. Thank you so much. And Carlin, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jesselyn, for that introduction. And we will go ahead and get started here. Welcome again. I'm Carlin from Lou Hammond Group, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Terry Gallagher. And as Justin mentioned, today we'll take you through just a look at what some journalists are looking for right now. And Terry will run us through the agenda.
Thanks, Carlin. And as Carlin said, I'm Terry Gallagher. I'm president of Lou Hammond Group, based in New York. And just our agenda today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. Going to talk a little bit about consumer sentiment and hopefully the travelers and visitors that we're getting to Sonoma County. Talk a little bit about 2021 trends and then what we can be doing to welcome back our guests and the media as well. And then we'll be very, very excited to talk to Adam and we'll tell you a little bit, and Adam will tell you a little bit about VinePair itself. And then we're going to give you guys the opportunity to send some questions to Adam or to us, and happy to answer them for you. So just again, a little bit, as I said, I'm president of Lou Hammond Group. We've got Carlin, and Carlin's our vice president. Has been with us about 9 years. And we'll talk to Adam in just a minute. But just a little bit about us. Excuse me. We have been really, really lucky to work with Sonoma County for the past 11 years. That means the world to us. It's a prestige account for us. Our company was founded in 1984. A lot of people don't realize Lou Hammond is actually a woman. It's actually Lorena Hammond, and she is a very dynamic woman from Texas, and she used to be head of PR for Pan Am Airways for many years before she started our company in 1984. And we've grown a lot in that 36 years, but we're really known for our work in public relations, social media, really in the both the destination marketing, hospitality, food and wine worlds, and beyond. So again, we're very blessed to be working with all of you and working with Sonoma County. So again, a little bit more about us. We've got about 50 plus clients. In addition to our office in New York, we've got an office in Charleston, South Carolina, Denver, Houston, LA, and Miami. And again, we've grown from 3 employees to now we're about over 40 employees. But right now, let's talk a little bit about what the sentiment is out there right now amongst consumers and amongst potential visitors. And the good news is it's going in the right direction, thankfully. We work with destination analysts, which has been very kind to provide data to the larger industry. And they have been doing basically a survey of over 1,000 people every week since the pandemic started. So they've really been able to track how sentiment has gone along. And as you can see, just really even in the past since January, it's trending up in the right direction. More people are saying that they're excited to travel and that they're open to travel inspiration. So what that means for us is marketing messages have a better chance of getting through because again, consumers are open to learning more and getting out and planning their next trip. And looking at when folks are expected to travel, again, it's the expectation is growing that as we get closer to more and more of the country being vaccinated, or hopefully at some point being completely vaccinated, as you see going into the summer months, that you're really going to see that kind of peak travel period coming up in the summer, and then naturally, as it normally would, going down as you get closer into the later in the fall and the winter. But again, that sentiment and that desire and expectation to be traveling again is growing, and again, very positive indicators for us. And we've seen some different trends popping up in the past year, and that always out of office. Companies right now, more and more companies are switching to remote working. We're all working remotely still. What we're also seeing, though, what that impacts is you're seeing people being more willing to take workcations or schoolcations. And in that case, because they're doing remote work or they're doing remote learning, there's the opportunity to increase midweek travel. So again, that's a really good indicator. We definitely expect weekend travel to be coming back, but this remote working and remote learning is giving the opportunity for people to be able to maybe fudge a little bit and do some midweek travel. Road trips are the big trend. We're seeing that throughout the media, throughout all our clients. The expectation and what they're seeing already is that more and more people are taking road trips or planning to take road trips. And you can see there, RV share, they're saying that there's a 166% year on year increase in bookings for people renting RVs and traveling. So it's amazing that just this expected growth in road trips. And the thing is, too, it's not just short road trips. Folks are willing to drive, 5 hours or more and drive state to state doing the road trips. Air travel is going to come back too. If you look in Florida right now, the amount of people that are on spring break, the college kids, there's no shortage of kids who hopped on planes to head down to Florida and do some spring break trips, for better or for worse. But you're just going to continue to see those road trips. But the driving trips are what's coming back sooner and coming back faster. We're seeing that people are really planning for that first big trip. They're spending more time on research, and they're looking to plan every aspect of their trips now. There's a stat: 74% are going to say that they'll spend more time than they normally would have selecting a destination. 66% will spend more time reading reviews. So again, what that means is that people are putting the effort into making sure that this first trip that they take post-pandemic is going to be well worthwhile. We're definitely seeing that, as you would expect, that the desire for domestic destinations versus international destinations has increased by more than 90%. And again, I don't think that's too surprising. There's few international destinations that you can go to anyway, but everybody's going to kind of start off at home, start off with those domestic trips first, and then move on from there. Again, these are all great things for us in Sonoma County. There's also this trend towards bucket list experiences. And, we've all been cooped up and we all feel like, hey, I deserve to treat myself a little bit. So that dream experience. And so whether that is, maybe doing something adventuresome that they haven't done in the past, or maybe going to a favorite place, but maybe spending a little bit more on it, doing it in more of an over the top way. It's incredible. We're seeing this increased use in private jet travel. VisaJet saw a huge increase in new membership programs just in the summer, last summer, when the pandemic had sort of been showing signs of ceasing before it spiked back up again. So again, the expectation is that's just going to keep growing. This other trend towards private buyout experiences, this is something that we're watching really closely as well, because people, opportunities then to maybe book full winery visits, book villa visits, booking oversized mansions, whatever the case may be. We've seen people booking theaters and taking out the whole buyout experience. So that's a great thing to be able to offer customers as an option to take advantage. Wellness is something that's coming up a lot. We're seeing that a lot in the media. and just throughout the consumers. Consumers right now are just eager to de-stress, and they're eager to just do things that they think are going to make them feel better. And whether that's, a great bottle of wine, something good to eat, something healthy to eat, maybe a spa experience, but they also want things that are personalized. And we say that we don't want to have too many choices to have to make. It's got to be made easy. And the people that are in companies that are simplifying things, making it easy to book, and easy choices for people, those are the folks that are going to be ahead. But again, it all comes down to getting outdoors, recovering from the Zoom fatigue, getting away from the screens, and that's what we offer in Sonoma County. Multi-generational. This is a trend that really started last year, as you saw so many grandparents and folks that were separated from their grandkids, separated from their children. And so this is really expected to be a boom coming up, that you're going to see more of these sort of multi-generational trips where they can have these memorable experiences together that have been kept apart. And again, that trend of returning to familiar places. Maybe it's places where they've traveled before, had great experiences and memories together as a family, but now there's an opportunity to explore it maybe in a new or different way.
Terry. Next, we'll look at some of the food and beverage trends as well as what's trending with the media. One of the biggest trends, and I think so many of you all in the wineries in Sonoma County did this well, was realizing the importance of diversification, and that when the tasting rooms closed, a lot of businesses had to pivot. And so wineries and restaurants started offering delivery, takeout, curbside pickup, perhaps things that were never part of the traditional operating sense, but really began to continue as a way to get your product out to different consumers. We saw a huge leap with virtual tastings as a way for consumers and friends to get together to celebrate, but also in the corporate space, as Terry mentioned, with so many companies working remote right now and those colleagues missing that chance on interacting together in person, that virtual tastings is also a great platform to build that corporate happy hour and build that corporate mentality. Sustainability, of course, Sonoma County being ahead of that curve for years, but really a trend building, especially within the food and beverage scene. But the importance of the commitment, whether it's wineries going organic, how the winery itself is being designed, carbon neutrality, but really consumers are looking for that commitment now from these businesses. And we know that sustainability isn't just about being organic, but really also incorporating that economic and social accountability. Again, really important with consumers now that they're looking for that three-pronged approach to sustainability. Ethical wine initiatives, seeing that as a hot topic. And really overall, especially for that millennial drinker, these are what people are looking for. We're also seeing a number of new practices that were introduced as part of COVID protocols that are going to be here to stay. Consumers are still looking for that desire to enjoy food and drink outside. As tasting rooms reopen indoors, people are still going to be wanting that socially distant experience, whether it's because it just is nice to have a little bit more privacy, or just as we all get comfortable again being in inside spaces with people. But that's really something that people are going to be looking for really throughout the rest of this year. We anticipate is that idea to be outdoor, or while you're inside to still have some space. QR codes really had their moment during the pandemic in place of physical menus, and eliminating that multiple touch aspect, being able to do it right from your phone was an efficient way to do things. And so it seems like those are really going to be here for stay. People enjoyed that technological aspect. Different programs like Toast as well, where you eliminate the need for a waitress or a server or a tasting room manager to bring a checkout, where you can just pay online, is another efficient tactic that people seem to be really receptive to and are going to want to keep doing this year. And the shift towards single serve bites, that instead of maybe a family style large dish or a large charcuterie board, people are more interested in having just their own items. Not everyone is touching the same serving spoon or touching the same cheese, or however it may be. In the media world, there's actually a lot of growth in 2020 and into this year. 60 new print magazines And of course, good for us is that food publications were the single largest launch category with new titles. Here's just two of the examples here. But overall, just the positive sign is that there are more opportunities to get our messaging out there. And there's certainly an audience for it that wants to be reading these new publications. And then when we just look at what topics right now the press has been really receptive to and what the big books are covering, diversity and inclusion, huge topic, but really important, really mixing it up. As I mentioned, sustainability, environmental practices that are being done. As Terry mentioned with some of the trends, bucket list experiences, fun and unique outdoor activities that people can do that they haven't done before, road trips, hot item, luxury experiences is part of that I deserve this mentality. People are willing to spend more money, so open to new types of things. They may cost more, but if it's worth it at the end of the experience. And of course, tried and true will always be what's new. That kind of information is always relevant. Consumers want to know about it and journalists want to write about it. So as news is happening, please be sure that we're pushing that messaging out. Next, we wanted to talk just a little bit more about how, as a winery, you can kind of just help prepare over the next couple weeks as we really prepare to ramp up and you're welcoming back guests and getting your messaging out to both consumers and to the media. So in terms of guests, this is a great time to do an audit of your social media channels, your website, making sure that everything is up to date. If you had shortened hours because of the pandemic, but now you'll be looking back to be opening full 7 days a week or extended hours, really want to make sure that information is accurately portrayed on your website. It's also important to make sure that we've got the outlined safety procedures done. So what's being done? Are your tables spaced out? Are there hand sanitizer stations set up? This is good. This is what people are going to be looking for. It's going to be that insurance that they need, that they'll feel safe coming to your business. And so just go ahead and be out and clear with it. There's nothing, taboo. This isn't something that's going to go away quickly and people are going to have forgotten about the pandemic. So it's not like, if I mention that we're wearing masks, that might make people think about masks or COVID and whatnot. So I think it's really going to be something people are looking for is they've got the spaced out, they've got the mask, they've got the hand sanitizer. It's just going to help people feel more comfortable. If you've got imagery of staff and masks, that's also something people are looking for, as well as images of what your outdoor space setup looks like. And that can be on your social media, it can be on your website, it can be on both. But again, people just want to really understand what the expectation is of what they're going to get. And so the best that you can showcase that, the better. As I mentioned, they'll just feel more comfortable with the setup in advance. As you look to go back to the media, and Adam will give us even more insights this in just a few minutes, but just as you kind of start thinking about your approach, our recommendation is to kind of put together some fresh speaking points. Put together 3 to 5 of your top messages. They can just be 1 or 2 bullet lines worth, but really just kind of taking this refresh. What is my business? What's my unique selling point? What messages do I want to be conveying about our winery, about our brand that I want the media and ultimately the consumers to understand? A great way to just check in with some press right now is to send a friendly email, a handwritten note to journalists, to social media influencers you've hosted in the past, just checking in on them. Everyone appreciates that, and just letting them know that you're back open, maybe any changes that have been made since the start of pandemic, the last time a year ago, but just as that friendly communication. It doesn't have to be a hard selling note. It can just be, hey, you've been good to us in the past, you've visited us in the past, here's what's up with us, how are you doing, how has your time been? So recommend that. There's nothing wrong with that. And really considering working with influencers right now as well too. We know how quickly they can produce content. And so as we're getting that open for business messaging out and really wanting to showcase in real time, this is what our setup looks like. We've got a lot of space, we're outdoors. The influencers just really help in that aspect of quickly reaching an audience. As we welcome back media, also just keeping in mind the emphasis on regional and drive market media. Everyone is going to feel different about their level of comfort when they're traveling right now, but similar to how consumers are feeling more comfortable getting in the car and driving, that's what we're finding from the journalists that we're speaking to with as well right now. So really shifting to those regional publications, the local newspapers, even if their reach may be a little bit smaller than a national publication, they're maybe more willing to travel right now if it's just a couple hours away in a car. So kind of recommending that for our outreach strategy. And then as you begin hosting journalists again, we really see the focus on individual visits right now as opposed to the group trip. I think the days where we bring 8 journalists together and all share dessert at the same time is probably going to be in the past, which probably is for the better, frankly. But really just focusing on those individual experiences, making sure people feel comfortable. So in cases, I'd be doing a private transfer instead of a group shuttle bus or something like that. And outlining that the experiences will be outdoor, what their accommodations will look like. So just really helping journalists feel comfortable in the situation that they'd be visiting. And, our last tip there is kind of just be prepared for a quick turnaround with how quickly regulations are changing. You may send that friendly note to a journalist on Tuesday and they may write back and say, hey, I'm actually just an hour away. I'd love to come this weekend. And so because people are kind of a bit more on the fly right now, they're not as heavily scheduled as a typical year, or maybe they're traveling all over the world. Just be prepared that if someone does respond quickly, that it's not out of the ordinary. They're not doing it to try to get anything by you. It's just like, hey, I'm actually free this weekend. The weather looks nice. Like, let's make this happen. So just kind of be prepared for that.
Carlin, one other thing too, when you were talking about regional, one of the things that we've been hearing from some of the national magazines is that they are going to be more likely to be using regional writers. So having a local writer explore the destination for a national publication is something that I think you're going to see be much more prevalent. Michelle Barron from Afar magazine, who's a news editor there, said that that's a big thing that they're focusing on, is trying to get the local perspective. And then also just more convenient, not having to put a writer in a plane or anything, and have them be able to drive easily to the destination that they hopefully know pretty well.
No, that's a great point, Terry. Thank you. Then just lastly, remember the resource that you've got in the Sonoma County Vintner organization with Barb and Rose and Jesslyn. You've got a great team here, and hopefully they won't get me mad at me that I'm volunteering them. But, anytime you've got a great idea or you just want to bounce some new programming ideas off this or pitch themes, please feel free to reach out to them, reach out to us. We're happy to talk through things, what we're seeing on a national trend level, or if you have an idea but feel like maybe it needs one more component of it to kind of tweak, use SCV, use us. We're here to be a resource. We want to help you and make it so whatever, either your pitch or your programming is really as sharp and as beneficial, as effective as possible. And also through the marketing programs with SCV, we've got Sonoma County Wine Month coming up next month that we're really excited about. The Sip from Home virtual hub on the Vintners page is really one of the best I've seen across the country. And they've got such a good resource in that and so helpful and user-friendly. So just keeping that you've got those platforms coming up. And when we can help promote those larger entities, it really helps make our pitch stronger. It makes the story stronger that we've got so many great participants. So just a plug for that. And finally, there, just kind of that last bullet of feel confident. It may feel like things are kind of still crazy and up in the air and, knowing that things are changing quickly, but this is ultimately something that we're all working to recover from together. Media is coming back, travel journalists, food journalists, wine journalists are all coming back and excited to get back to this new normal. And so, it's okay that things are going to be changing constantly. Don't let that hinder you from not wanting to outreach. That it's better to kind of get things out there and we can always help work and keep telling the story as it continues to evolve. Okay. So then next we will now introduce Adam, and I will stop our share. All right, we're good to go. Adam, thank you again for being here. Do you want to kind of first start off and just tell people a little bit about you and the history of VinePair?
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders of VinePair. I'm also the CEO. We started VinePair about 7 years ago now, and it's quickly grown to be the largest and most read publication about wine, beer, and spirits in the country. We reach about 32 million people a month across all of our various channels. We have a slate of podcasts we run. We have a print publication. We have the digital publication. We have 2 really successful different verticals of email newsletters. We used to do events, obviously prior to COVID. And then just to vinepair.com alone, we do about 5 million people that read the site a month. And then obviously people get accessing us through Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, et cetera. And our entire sort of goal is looking at the world of wine, beer, and spirits through the lens of culture, the lens of travel, business, et cetera, which is, I think, why we have such a strong readership, not only amongst consumers, but also trade. So when we look at VinePair as a publication, about 27% of the readership is trade. And when I say trade, I mean not just winery owners, marketers, et cetera, but somms, beverage directors, wine shop owners, et cetera, who self-identify. And so that's why we have a separate vertical for them called VP Pro that we launched about 2 years ago that's very much trade focused and looks at data and the business of alcohol. And then the consumer publication is really focused on all the things you talked about, right? Experiences, culture, just in-depth reporting, all that stuff. And we have, at least at this point in time, 100 writers across the world who are all stringers with a team in New York of 20 people.
Yeah, and Adam, it's amazing when you started VinePair. I remember us thinking here, geez, that sounds like an interesting concept. Let's see if it works, kind of thing. And now it's working. It seems because I have to tell you too, everyone at our firm always is very complimentary of the quality of journalists, just being professional, being creative. Coming up with interesting topics. So, we're always sharing leads and requests for information that isn't just your normal, boring, run-of-the-mill, dry kind of stuff, and really a lot of different types of topics and perspectives. So
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, so a bit about my background. I'm a journalist. I am a journalist. So I, have a journalism degree. I used to teach at Columbia Journalism School. I have a background in journalism. And so it's very important at VinePair that we hire journalists. So that compliment is really means a lot to me. Our executive editor who runs editorial now is Joanna Sciorino. She comes to us from Food 52 and Lucky Peach and Bon Appetit, right? So that's who we look for. So what we sort of say when we talk about the content we look for at VinePair is, great journalism, not book reports. So, we very much try to step aside, even though we are a digital first publication, we are not a blog, right? So we don't look to, have someone who goes to a winery and just writes about what it was like to be at the winery that day, right? That's not the kind of content we're looking for. I recognize for lots of wineries, that's important for business and for visitors. But we definitely shy away from that and look for people who have, clips at, publications that are similar to us, like Eater, Esquire, et cetera, and share a lot of writers. A lot of our stringers write for those publications as well.
Yeah, and a lot of trend-oriented stuff as well, it seems, which, I think is really, really important. And we'll talk to you a little bit more, ask you a little bit more about that and some of the trends you're seeing. But just, want to kind of kick it off and just, we've all been homebound and everything else for the past year, but, kind of what have you been doing? How have you gotten yourself through this pandemic?
It's been crazy. I mean, so I'm still at home. We have a beautiful office that we moved into 3 months before COVID, brand new office that we totally got renovated with a rooftop where we're going to do outdoor parties. And we built a bar inside the office where we're going to be able to have, guest bartenders and somms come with brands. And that now is inhabited by one person and that person's dog, which is my co-founder, Josh, because he lives 3 blocks away. It's on 5th Avenue and 28th Street, but yeah, we're not there anymore. We hope to go back to the office at some point in the middle of the summer when our entire staff is vaccinated. I think the vaccine rollout is happening quicker now. And, we're hearing of more people who are at our company that are employed. And I think what's different about journalism and about a newsroom is that everyone wants to come back to the office. Right. So we're a staff where that's very important. They want to be inside with everyone else because that's where the best stories come. For the last year running big editorial meetings on Zoom, it is not the same, right? Even when a sample comes for us, right, to the office and someone on the tastings team tastes that wine, and then at the end of the day can pass that around to all the other writers, not just the writers, the designers, the salespeople, et cetera, that's really valuable. And that's being lost right now. Right. So for us, wine is now going to our tastings director, Keith, to his home in New Jersey, or it's going to Tim at his apartment in Queens, or a lot of it's coming to me. And so we're the only people who get to experience these liquids. And so that's something that we, need to rectify. And the only way to rectify that is going back to the office. So we definitely will be a back to the office company. but we will be more flexible when we go back, obviously, right? There'll be much more, oh, sure, come in at 11. We already, as a startup, I guess, or a new digital media company, we're more flexible. We were much more of a get your projects done company already. We weren't a strict, 9 to 5, 10 to 6, what have you. But yeah, everyone's just been working from home and we've been living on Zoom. I think we've still tried to tell the stories in the ways that we can tell them. But I think for this industry and what we do, it's really hard to replace, the stories you're able to access and the connections you're able to make when you're either in person or we get to host people in our offices, again, for the same reasons, right? So I think a bunch of us have taken part in digital tastings throughout the year, but if a winemaker comes into the VinePair offices because they've scheduled with one of our writers, it was always a great opportunity to say, hey, this winemaker is going to be in, the front conference room. Whoever's free and they want to join, they're more than happy to have more people come and taste. Whereas now, again, it's that tasting appointment where it's like you with one person, because I totally understand it's incredibly expensive to send 10 bottles to 10 people on the VinePair staff so that they can all taste the same wine. But what's hard is that I think a lot of wineries have lost out on stories with us this year because it may not have appealed to me, but it may have appealed to 2 or 3 other people on staff who saw an angle that I didn't see. Right. So those are the things that we're looking forward to, having happen again.
That makes sense. And I think, I think we were going to ask you, really what are sort of the changes that you kind of see will remain in place after the pandemic ends? It sounds like, definitely the working ability to work remotely and everything, but are any other kind of things that the way you've been doing things that will either change or stay the same from this past year?
I think things like this will continue to happen, which is great. There'll be opportunities to speak to a large group of people, as opposed to sort of going around and having these individual conversations, which has been really useful. I do think, especially when it comes to wineries reaching freelancers or stringers, this virtual tasting is still very valuable because I think, when it comes to for those that aren't aware, the way that freelancers normally work, we have a few, writers at large with VinePair who everyone knows they write for us 2 to 3 times a week. They're also on our masthead. So if you're ever wondering if you wanted to pitch us who says they could write for VinePair and actually probably will be able to place the column, just look at the masthead. If it's someone that had a clip with us once last year, there's no guarantee. But I think, to reach freelancers, these virtual tastings are really valuable still because you can send out wine to 15 to 20 people, you can reach them, and they can pitch the X amount of publications they would normally pitch based on the story that they learn. And it's I think, really economical for wineries. Whereas for larger publications like ourselves, the Bon Appetits of the world, et cetera, there still will be some need, I think, if you're trying to place that bigger national story, to have some sort of, either you're coming to New York and you let us know and you come to our office, or when we're out in Sonoma, we let you know and there's some sort of hosting so that we get to know you and see more of the stories. We're usually looking for like deeper stories you may not even know to pitch us. But I do think that, to be a very long answer of your question, I think that the virtual tasting will continue to stay, especially for freelancers, and I think that's very valuable, and wineries should very much consider that they keep doing it.
That's great information. Yeah, and you touched upon content a little bit, but is there what type of content has resonated with you guys, or really with your audience? I guess maybe if you can tell from that aspect, is there something that really has resonated over the past several months?
Gosh, it always runs the gamut. I mean, anything that can connect back to culture is really important. So stories we really try to be that publication that's using wine or cocktails, et cetera, to talk about larger issues, right? So if we can tell a story about a winery in Sonoma that's really talking about environmental issues, or if we can use a family in Sonoma to talk about family dynamics and owning a business, or the enduring appeal of moving to Sonoma, right? Those are things we're really interested in. We just wrote a story recently about a bunch of beverage professionals from cities that were moving to smaller towns, and like what that looks like and what's happening in that migration. So you would either read that story because you're interested in doing that yourself, or you happen to live in a small town that's wanting that to happen, or you're just interested in sort of this reverse migration that we've seen during COVID. So we look at a lot of that kind of stuff. We obviously write travel guides. Our readers love travel guides. They want to know where to go. They want to be the experts, right? So they want to be able to say, I was told to stay here. I was told to visit these wineries. I was told to eat here, so that they, because as you even mentioned, they want to do research, but they want research to come in from credible sources, and be able to then go back to their friends or people in their family and say, okay, this is what we're doing. So that we've seen continue to be, and in that regard, to our own site, right, the amount of traffic we've seen just to our articles on, individual wines people should check out, cocktails they should make, pairings, right, has continued to just explode because people wanted to still be experts when they were at home for the last year. I think what is going to be really interesting to see post-COVID is a lot of people are going to come out of COVID with a lot more wine knowledge than they had going in, right? They took the time to learn about things. They got to know what they like. And so, they may come to the wine with more knowledge, and they may expect, more knowledge back. But I think you're going to have people who have, just a large appetite to learn and to hear, right? They're not just there now. It's like, stick the glass out, pour in the tasting pour, drink, and move on. Like, they really want to have the conversation because they've spent the last year getting into it in the same way they got into making sourdough.
Yeah. All right, this next question, two-part question. Approximately how many, releases or pitches are you receiving on any given day? And what really makes you open one email and not the other?
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Hundreds across all of our team. So this is really important. Like, there's a major difference between good pitches and bad pitches. The biggest difference is do not send us a blanket pitch that you send to everyone else. Also, I know it's big news for you, but if someone just got a new job at the winery, VinePair's not going to cover it. Right. Like, we're not going to cover that a new person was named winemaker, or that a new member of the family has taken over, or that's not what we do. And if you pitch us that we think you don't know the publication, right, that you haven't read the publication, that you're not aware of what the publication covers, if you want your wine tasted and scored, right, we go on the website. There's very clear instructions for who it goes to in the tastings department, how that works. And then we look for really tailored pitches. So email saying, hey, I read these 3 stories, thought that, this story might be interested to you guys based on what it seems like you're covering now, and try to figure out who the writer was there, right? So either get to the writer or get to someone on the team. It's really easy to pitch VinePair. The email is editors@vinepair.com, right? That goes to everyone on the editorial team, so they all see it. Or try to develop a relationship individually, right? So I obviously am one of the co-owners, but I don't run editorial day to day. Joanna does, but I sit in on all the editorial meetings. So if there's a relationship, and I always provide pitches of people I know and stories where you can build an individual relationship with Joanna or Tim or Kat or any of the people on the team. I think that's really important. I also think that's very important when it comes to national publications that also use stringers. If you really want to get covered by us, you need to have publications with people that actually have an @vinepair.com email address. If you have a great relationship with a stringer, I call them stringers, freelancers, you may or may not be covered by us, because they then you may not know what their relationship is with us, right? Or how often we take pitches for them, or how often we are pitching them back and asking them to write something that came out of an editorial meeting, right? So again, I think that's also important, is trying to figure out who the players are. But I would say the 100 pitches that come in that are very form literally get deleted. And that's what my editorial team tells me every day. It's delete, 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 delete. Like, that's just what happens. And that's a shame, but it's how it works, because there's too many people doing that. Whereas, when you guys email me, it's very much personal. So I open the email because it's a personal email that came to me, and I want to make sure that I read it and I take it in. And that's very, very important when it comes to PR.
That's great information. I'm so glad that you said that, because it's something that we try to get across to folks. I also appreciate you using the word stringer, because I was a former newspaper stringer, and I never liked being called a freelancer.
A stringer.
I was a stringer.
It's funny how many people we use the word with, though, because again, we come from journalism, and they're like, "What's a stringer?" Like, that's it's a better title than freelance.
It is a better title. Agreed. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you was, there's still, I talked earlier about domestic travel versus international travel. And, obviously folks are still either unable to, or there's going to be hesitancy to travel to Europe. So, I mean, what opportunities do you kind of see for domestic wine destinations like Sonoma County? Do you see that as a growing opportunity?
Yeah, I think that American wine regions, especially Sonoma and Napa, are about to get slammed this summer. Based on what we're seeing, based on what people are saying, I think, gosh, like it's there was a desire. I think we felt, COVID has been so weird, right? Because there's been hope and then there's been reality. So just like in August of this summer, when I started hearing people being like, our office is going to open in September or October, like we were going back to school, and then everyone realizing, no, this is still very real. I think the same was happening about a month or two ago when the vaccine was rolling out faster in the United States. And we were starting to think, are we going to go to Europe? And I think especially last week with Italy announcing another shutdown, no one's officially announced that Italy is canceled yet, but that's 100% apparent that that's going to happen in June. All of these things, I think people are realizing like Europe is still not the place I'm going to feel really comfortable. I love that you both brought up this importance of social media that shows what your setup looks like. I mean, I know everyone I know goes on social to see what people's setup looks like, whether it's restaurants, wineries, et cetera. So like that, it's very important that you absolutely do that. But I think there is just going to be a larger trust and comfort level amongst consumers for what's happening here, because we can read the numbers. We know that what was the data last week, that 25% of the country already has gotten at least one shot, right? We were feeling comfortable that everyone will have access to it by May. And it just doesn't look like that's going to be the case in Europe. And so I think that there's going to be a desire for people, though, to go out and have great food and have great drinks. And so they're going to go to the great American wine regions, and they're going to look for these great experiences. And I think, again, the other benefit you have is there may be someone who was willing to take a risk, right, and go to Europe, but you're a much shorter flight. So like I'm much more willing to still sit on a plane for 4 hours from New York or 4.5 to California with a mask on the whole time than I am to fly to Italy or France overnight, having to figure out how I sleep with the mask on. Right. And so again, I think that's going to benefit because there will be people who once they're vaccinated say, you know what, I'll get on a plane. Like I'm seeing, everything come out, but then they're going to head straight to Napa and Sonoma as opposed to heading to, Piedmont or Tuscany or things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. This one kind of on a fun topic, but what are some trends that you're seeing just within wine or from a winery perspective that has you really excited?
Oh, I mean, I think one of the trends we're seeing is people just getting so excited about wine. I think, the one thing that COVID has done is there has been this sort of rush to what we call sort of comfort foods, right? So, there are the wines that you would expect to do well, and I don't mean the brands, but just sort of like the varietals that they have, right? So Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, like the sort of grapes people know. But I think there will be experimentation out of COVID because people now feel comfortable. And I think, the sort of attention being paid back to wine and food and entertaining is really cool. I know people who got into wine during COVID that were not wine drinkers before. The same is true for people who now started making cocktails who are not cocktail people, right? There's people had time. And so they decided to figure out what they like and really got into it and tried to recreate experiences they had had in the past and started to think about, buying great wines and, what makes a great wine. And the thing that's really amazing is that designation of comfort food hasn't meant low cost, right? The premiumization has continued to grow, especially amongst like the millennials and young Gen X and older Gen Z, right? They're spending $20, $25, $30 a bottle at retail on wine, which is awesome, right? So it proves that they're willing and they understand why these wines cost money and what that quality means. And so for a region like Sonoma, which is, explaining to consumers, hey, these wines are more expensive because, the vineyards are sustainable and, many of them are organic and that costs more to make the wines and make them higher quality, actually is a idea that consumers understand now, which is cool.
That is cool. Have you sort of seen again through this? I mean, you mentioned virtual classes and virtual tastings. I did that during the pandemic. And I didn't do it for beer because I feel like I've consumed enough in my life that I should have a good knowledge of it at this point. But just in terms of just wine itself, are you seeing a certain type of wine that is growing, a certain varietal that
Yeah.
has Pinot taken off during the pandemic or anything like that, or anything that you've noticed that trend wise?
Pinot's done really well. I mean, like what we saw in the pandemic that was really interesting is that cab really exploded, including in the summer, which is just very, very rare. So people were turning to drinking Cabernet in the summer months. Pinot continued to do really well, but like, look, the behemoth, which has faced a massive deseasonalization, is rosé. Rosé started to peak in terms of consumer interest because we have this massive consumer interest index called VinePair Insights, the second to third week of shutdown, and it hasn't stopped. And that's been pretty consistent across the last few years, where we've seen like this peak go like this, right? So people really are looking for rosé at all times of the year. There's no more an official rosé season. Obviously, as press, we still treat like our massive best rosés of the year list is still coming out next month, right? We're getting submissions now from producers, but consumers would have been happy to drink rosé yesterday. And I think that's really interesting. So also making sure when you're welcoming consumers back that you do have that wine on your list. It's just really unbelievable to see how popular that wine has become as just an overall category. And what we see as well, which is interesting, is American rosés that perform the best amongst our tasters and with consumers are American rosés based on Pinot. So those are, these 100% Pinot Noir rosés are doing really, really well. Consumers really love them. So again, there's something, that benefits Sonoma.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. Well, I think we can turn it over to some questions now from the audience. We've got some here in the queue. Adam, we got a question from Davis. I know you have a large readership. Can you break down the demographics of your readers, what the largest category is, and where are they located?
Totally. I have to do it every day. 50-50 male, female, 70% between the ages of 21 and 44. 70% make over $75,000 a year individually. So they have money and they spend it. And the biggest markets are where you would think, right? New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, Denver, Atlanta, DC, Boston. So we're very national as a publication. Prior to COVID, we did events all over the country. Right before COVID, the week before the shutdown, we were the sponsor of the Charleston Wine and Food Festival, right? So we were down there doing huge events and grand tastings and stuff that obviously then resulted in a shutdown the week later. But so we definitely have a very national readership. But for California specifically, San Francisco and LA go back and forth between being our second and third largest readerships after New York. New York is by far the largest, but then it's LA and San Francisco.
Perfect. That sounds good. Another question, from your perspective, are there current opportunities you see wineries may not be taking advantage of that they should to help consider build brand awareness with consumers?
I think a lot of wineries, just aren't taking advantage of that personal relationship that they could have with a publication or with, a writer, et cetera. I think that a lot of people play by the same script, which is like put out press release, send wine, respond asking why wine hasn't been covered, right? As opposed to sort of that relationship of, hey, I want to talk to you about like who we are as a family or as people, why we believe so much in this. We'd love to have you out when that's appropriate. Obviously, we'd love to host you, hopping on that Zoom for 30 to 45 minutes, asking the writer themselves, I think also what specific wines they may be interested in, right? So there's also this general sort of idea that we see amongst a lot of wineries. It's like, I want to push this wine, so I'm just going to send it without ever saying, well, maybe the writer like isn't into Riesling, or has already written that they don't think that this region is a great place for X grape or something. So asking the writer, hey, we make these kinds of wines. What would you be interested in trying? Because you never know, right? That writer might be really into, Russian River Pinots, but you didn't ask. But then you could send them everything you make, and they could, write an amazing story about how you're helping to revolutionize. I also think it's, being okay with when you're covered, it not always being a feature just about you, right? So potentially pitching like an overall feature. Hey, myself and 4 other wineries are doing this really cool thing. And that's actually what we're looking for, right? Like, it's not a trend if you're the only one doing it. It's often not a story if you're the only one doing it. But if you can bring us 3 or 4 other places in your area that are doing the same thing, and we can write about it as these wineries are coming together to, help with X social justice issue or Y, sustainability issue, that's a story, right? Then that's a trend story. So I think thinking about that as well, a lot of people aren't doing that. It's always about like what I'm doing. And in that case, it often isn't enough to warrant, the 1,000+ words that would go into an article.
Yeah, it's funny. Florence Fabricant, the great, legendary New York Times food editor, food writer, she would always say to us, "Give me 3 or 4 examples, and I'll make it a trend. Like, just give me some examples." And you're right. That's just a stronger story.
It is, and I think it's hard because you want to be the whole story. I totally understand it. Like when we first started out as a digital media publication, and we had PR, and we were looking for stories, it was really hard for us to be like, oh, we're going to just be like one of the 4 or 5, digital media companies that's launching. Now we're the only one that still exists, but we wanted it to be all about us. And you have to realize that that's not interesting. I mean, we realized as journalists, but it's hard to realize that like, no, it's actually more interesting when there's multiple voices and we can really show this as a thing than it just being a profile about one person. Profiles are boring. People don't like to read. I mean, no one wants to read a profile unless the person's really, really famous, right? So it's instead like, what's the larger story and how can you connect a bunch of people to it?
That's a great point. Another kind of technical question in regards to, pitching and getting you to open the email. Is it about the personalization of the subject line or just the body of the text, or what's that great subject line that could get you excited?
I mean, I think first of all, it would be, so it shouldn't feel formed. So you should never get anything that feels like it was mail merged, which you can tell, right? And that's a bad look. I think also with the subject line, it should be something like, read X story on VinePair, wanted to talk to you about it, or hey Adam, thought would love to talk to you about this cool thing my winery is doing, or love VinePair. Like also like flattery gets you a long way. So like if the subject line is like, I love this publication, I'm a huge reader, I guarantee you we open every email to us, and I guarantee you every other publication will too. Right? Like I'm obsessed with this publication, blah, blah, blah. I got this incredible, so I write one column a week now, that's the Ask Adam column, but then I host the VinePair podcast, which is like sort of our temple podcast. We've been doing these individual interviews with producers, owners, et cetera, throughout the pandemic. So sort of we have the roundtable discussion on Mondays, where it's just like a subject, for those who haven't listened, it's a big conversation about just a big topic. And then on like Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, an interview will drop between either myself or Zach with someone. And so we did the big roundtable discussion that I sort of mentioned earlier about, somms and restaurateurs and bartenders moving to smaller towns and opening restaurants, and what's that like, and is that hard, et cetera. And this guy writes in, who happened to own a restaurant I loved in Brooklyn, but I never knew him. It was called Greenpoint Fish and Lobster. And he writes in this like long email about how much he loves VinePair, how he reads it every day, how he listens to the podcast, how he, it's given him so much value, and that he's moved to Cape Cod with his wife and young kid, and they opened a, restaurant called The Pheasant. And he told me all about The Pheasant. And I wrote back and said, hey man, come on the podcast. And I had him on the podcast, and we had a 30-minute discussion about that. And it was because his email was like, dude, he gets it. Mm-hmm. He listens. He wasn't asking to be covered. He just told and in no point in his email was him asking for coverage. He was telling me all about just his experience and how the podcast he listened to made him think about it, whatever. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm having him on. So I think that's what works, right? Is showing that you know, and people will pay attention.
No, that's awesome. Another question, we can kind of speak to this if you don't necessarily have the sense, but one of the trends we talked about was the personalization and the buyout. And so someone asked, the buyout winery experience, how lavish does this need to be? Do you want to kind of give your thoughts, and we can give ours too?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the press side, obviously we like to cover things that seem baller. So if you're doing something crazy, it's going to get covered. If it's like, hey, you full take over the winery, blah blah blah, people love that. That's a good story. But then, I mean, on the point of the consumer, it's like, what's the consumer willing to pay? But we've seen some pretty lavish things that have been pitched that people are definitely responding to.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to be careful with that in terms of like, then who are you saying that you are for, right? Like, what demographic of people are you for if it is that over the top? But over the top definitely gets press.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, just from the PR side too. I mean, if someone tells me their winery, they've got the private jet and they're putting in the hot tub and they've got live entertainment or John Legend's coming or all that stuff, like, yeah, as a PR person, I love this because I know that that'll be good. But I think for the actual transaction of a consumer booking it, I don't think you need those things. I think you just can make it a realistic experience for consumers. So I think sometimes when we're building out these programmings, you kind of have those two approaches of, I can go this one route and make it really PR and really have some fun. And if no one books it, that's okay. I don't need it to book to be successful. I want the PR for it. Or I want to make this realistic offering and we'll provide catering and people get it for half a day and whatnot. So I think people can kind of feel what they feel comfortable with. But right, to your point, that the more over the top it'll be is what's going to get the PR out of it.
Yeah. But I think, for the packages you're thinking about, I'm just thinking about what we think about when we go on press trips, or when I used to go on press trips. Like, the more it was sort of a day in the life, I was way more into it. And I think consumers would be too. So it's like, look, hey, we have a pizza oven in the back. Like, we're going to hang out, like, we're going to walk through the vineyards, but then, like, we're just going to make pizzas together and hang out. People will pay for that. They'll pay to sort of hang out with you. It's interesting how many readers will write in and say, like, they love the story on X, but they would never get to hang out with the winemaker, or they would never get to, walk around the property with the owner. So if you could, I mean, even just offering those experiences, for the right price, because obviously your time is very valuable, but those experiences are things people will pay for because, they want to have those. They want to talk to the person who actually owns the property or the person who actually makes the wine. So that's all you may need to do to make it feel premium.
Yeah. And those folks, there's so many families, multi-generational families in Sonoma County and everywhere, but we just see that so much, and all of them, there's so many great personalities that, I would kill to just pay, sit there and learn a little bit or kind of hear their story and how they got into it. Because a lot of folks also did something else and then made the transition, a complete life change to do this, and why did they do that? So those are the kind of stories I find interesting too, of like, I was here, but now I'm here, and here's why I did that. So yeah. Well, I think we had an hour of your time, and you've been so generous with it.
Yeah, I did. There's one question I do want to answer just because it's a fascinating one, and then I'll let you guys run if everyone.
Yeah.
So the question that anonymous attendee had about, do we think we'll see Pinot demand ever see a backlash in overplanted areas, and how do you get people to understand that Sonoma is very diverse in terms of plantings beyond Pinot? This is a question every single region that has had massive success based on a varietal has. Look, there could be a backlash down the road, but people like Pinot, and I think people are trying to figure out what styles of Pinot they like. I totally understand the frustration here. Just ask a ton of wineries in the Finger Lakes if they want to be making Riesling. And a lot of them will tell you they would much rather be selling Cabernet Franc, but that, like, all the writers 10, 20 years ago, before we existed, said that Riesling was what you get up there. And so that's what they all grow, right? So I think it's hard. One of the ways to combat that, right, is building relationships with publications like ourselves, with, get a group together of people who are making another varietal or another style that you think people need to know about. Send those wines, talking about those wines, and people will start telling that other story too. But also realize that there's a lot of regions in this country that would die to be known for one varietal and be as successful. And we hear that all the time too, from, regions in Virginia, and other Texas, et cetera, who are like just looking for that varietal they can be known for, because for consumers, it makes it much easier to have an access point in. Oh, I like Pinot, so I should totally check out Sonoma. So it's such a double-edged sword, because I get it on the point of a winemaker that you want to be known for diversity, but I also get it that it makes it a lot easier that you're not. So stuff to think about.
Perfect. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. And of course, Adam, for this great discussion. Hopefully everyone found it interesting and you learned a couple things. I know I did. And just overall, it was great to chat and see everyone. Just on anything else that you want to wrap up before everybody heads off?
No, I think that's it. Thank you again, Adam, for joining us. And thank you to our friends, Terry and Carlin at Luhaman Group. We really love working with you throughout the year. And we look forward to getting some great press around Sonoma County and getting visitation up in the next few months. So
perfect. All right, everybody. We'll see you. Thank you.
Thanks,
thank
Adam.
you.
Bye.